Russ Taff was born the son of a preacher man, a fiery Pentecostal preacher man who was also an alcoholic. To escape the dualism of his family's public religiosity and private addictions, Russ began pouring his pain and prayers into music. It wasn't long before his rugged voice and charismatic stage presence captured the attention of pioneering contemporary Christian music group The Imperials, giving Russ his first taste of celebrity and his first Grammy Award while only in his early 20s. Soon, Russ Taff would be a household name. But while his musical platform was up in lights, his interior life began to splinter as he began a battle with his father's demon, alcohol. 30 years later, Russ is sharing his life story, from musical fame to the pit of addiction to the redemption found through rehab and recovery in the new documentary, Russ Taff, I Still Believe, in theaters October 30th for a one-night-only Fathom Events presentation. On the eve of the documentary's release, Russ and his delightful wife and fellow creative Tori graciously invited me into their historic home in the sleepy heart of Bell Buckle, Tennessee, to talk about the roads to recovery and a life lived in a newfound discovery of grace in this poignant edition of CCM Magazine's Features on Film. I'm your host, Andrew Greer. So, when I think, the movie, I Still Believe, and with some of the energy around that conversation, especially in Nashville, a lot of people talking about it right now, excited to be a part of it. And what I keep hearing and what I'm always surprised by, and I don't know that I'm surprised by this, but it's just, one, it's so cool. I love that it's coming up about you, but I hear people like Bart Millard from Mercy Me, right? Michael Tate from the Newsboys, people who contribute to the movie. But I even think about you, we're talking about Tim and Faith, and I've heard Faith Hill in the past talk about how her music, her voice, the way she expresses herself musically, being shaped a lot by your music.
Really?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, do you ever think, 40 years ago when you were just a kid, basically, coming up and beginning in music, did you ever think that you would influence not only peers, but generation and maybe generations of singers especially?
No, I mean, we both grew up in small communities, but nobody I knew had done this, left town and pursue a career like this. And so I think the only person out of Hot Springs was Randy Goodrum, who wrote Bluer Than Blue, and he played piano for Roy Orbison. And he was like the only musician that came out of that little town. And everybody told me, maybe you can do that on the side, but get a real job. Right. And you would say, but I want to do this, and it's not even about money, but I've got to sing. And I got over and over, just get a real job. This will either pass and it's just a phase. Yeah. And you had no one to hold up to say, look, they did. But I was just faced with negativity. And it got to a point where I just had to step out and say, I'm going. And thank God, Tori, we were both so young, but she saw something there. And this boy, my boyfriend, needs to minister. He needs to sing because that's what's in his heart. But I remember pulling out that little town, and I was 19. I went to work with Jerry Savelle and Evangelists for a while before I went to the Imperials. But I stopped and I looked back at the city, Hot Springs, just hills and stuff. And I yelled, one day I'm going to come back and everybody's going to know my name. I was so mad, that no one, I thought, was supporting me. I'm sure there were some, but they didn't. Silently, no one ever did it. Yeah. And so the thought of years later that my music, because I did it for me and Jesus. I mean, it
was a pure thing.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about him, and I loved singing about him because even as a teenager, what he had done. But the thought that I would
influence others in that way.
In that way, just trying to follow what's right. It's like when I won my first Grammy. And my mom and dad, they were country. They were, and they didn't know. Daddy went to the 8th grade and had to go back to the farm and start working again because his dad died. And Mama went through high school, but in this small little bitty town in Arkansas. But I remember Imperials, we had won our first Grammy. I think it was for Sail On. And I ran back to the Shrine Auditorium there. It was 78, something like that. And I'd put a dime in and called my mother. And I said, Mom, you're not going to believe this, but we just won a Grammy. And she was silent for a minute. She goes, well, that's great, son. What's a Grammy? And I said, Mom, it's a little award they give singers. And she said, well, that's good. That's really good. But when I said I'm singing on the Grand Ole Opry stage, they knew that.
That did it, yeah.
But I just knew I wanted to sing for him. And that was the motivation.
Yeah.
And the Imperials, we had raised money to bring, I guess I was 17, to bring the Imperials to our town because they had just started.
This is before you were a part of it.
Oh, yeah. I was like 18, 19.
Okay.
I joined when I was 22. But just trying to introduce a different kind of music besides Statesman and the Blackwood Brothers and the Goodmans.
Something more contemporary.
Yeah, for our people, our generation. We did 20 minutes before they came on, and then they called us back up to do the encore. They remembered that night 2 years later. And they tracked me down to where I was working with Jerry Savelle and said, why don't you come and, let's see if this will work. And so with his encouragement, he could have talked me out of it. Tori could have talked me out of it.
Yeah.
But I went, and they hired me that night. So, I see God's hand everywhere, and...
Well, even things like this movie I still believe does a wonderful job of celebrating your career, and it's a career that has been celebrated, and that I believe, and many other people do believe, that is deserving of being well celebrated. That same negativity, it seems like, had a play later. There were some cracks in your personal life, even at the apex of what some people consider an achievement in a career. Take me back to that, or you don't have to take me back and keep moving forward. In that story of when did those cracks, what were those cracks, where did those come from, and how did they begin to expose themselves? Okay. That puts you now on this path of what I call authentic living, but recovery from alcoholism.
Absolutely. The Imperials brought me to Nashville at 22, and I never, around here, there's always been some social, some Christians have wine with meal and that sort of thing. It's no big deal. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know, this gene was inside of me.
Sure. Had you not tasted even alcohol at this point?
I never drank till I was 26. And we were in New York. Tori's brother played with the New York Philharmonic. And his wife, my sister-in-law, danced with the American Ballet Theater. So we're in New York. It was July on the 5th floor of an apartment building, hot as could be. Even had a little room air conditioner, but there were no more Cokes. I would drink Coke back then. There was no bottled water to buy.
Right, yeah.
You just drank it out of the sink. But there were 3 Heinekens in there, and it's like I'd never drank before, and everybody else does just fine. So it's so hot. I may just have one, but I got to go all the way back to the beginning of my life to talk about how the cracks begin to come, because I was taught certain things. One of the worst beatings I ever got in my life was when I was 9 years old. I told my friend Mom and Dad had an argument, and I showed up back home, and Mom was waiting for me. And when I walked in, she sat from about me to that china chest over there, and she just started screaming, "You don't tell anybody what goes on in this family. You don't tell anyone." And started screaming and throwing stuff at me, and finally came over and was punching me in the face with her fist, screaming, "You don't know, you don't talk to anybody what's going on," until I was balled up in a corner.
Just protecting yourself.
Yeah, in a fetal position, her just kicking and screaming. And I had to go wear long sleeve shirts to school for 3 weeks for all of this. So and constantly getting, "You're not worth the bullet to shoot you with. You're not worth the salt that goes on your bread. You'll never amount to anything. And why can't you be more like your cousin?" Mm-hmm. Constantly. And you don't tell anybody they're doing good because they'll get the big head.
Right.
And so, and when I got into my young adult life in my middle to later teens, I couldn't play sports. I was short and slow, and so but I could play guitar and I could sing a little bit, and that was my thing. Like if you're a great baseball player,
Sure.
mine was, I can take this acoustic and I'll learn a song and I can do it in church. But there was this competitive thing between me and my dad. He had to be the center of attention always.
And he was the preacher.
Oh yeah. And they both had to work to make ends meet. But we never had birthdays because they didn't have time. But yet the church would throw him a big birthday party every year, the whole church.
And there was
with
time for
presents
that.
and everything. Yeah, and he would sit there and just smile. I mean, all the attention in the
Receive
room
it, just-
came to them. But when I would do good, I would pay for it because he would shun me for a couple of days. He wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't look at me, and wouldn't respond. It was just like, you're dead to me. So it started this thing of I know when I do good, I'm going to get hit in the head.
Right.
And so, but it's in you, and you feel like the Holy Spirit is saying, man, I love it when you do this. And you do it, and you feel his presence a little bit. But then you have to go over here, and you get hit in the head with a hammer. To the point, when you sing, after the few minutes, you're like this.
Right.
Because
So
you were a kid.
The thing that you're feeling so close and connected to your Creator by is the same thing you're having to flinch
Yeah.
from. I mean, that's extremely confusing. Almost as if, because at this point, you're still a part of the Imperials, right?
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, Imperials, hugely successful at this
Lord,
point,
yes.
Grammys, et cetera, and mainstream success, and a lot of recognition. I wonder if you were almost looking, it's kind of this flinch thing, you are interacting out of your calling to be a musician and in a way a minister through musician, and to speak to people about the gospel through music. At the same time, almost like looking for the other shoe to drop, so you'll just, you have to tell the story, but do you think you were finding a way for the other shoe to drop because it had always been this?
Well, with this shame, it's like we Taffs, we're losers. We Taffs are addicts, and because just about all my brothers, my dad, had addiction problems, and I had that gene and didn't know it. But it's almost like, Andrew, I split. There was this Jesus part of me that loved God and sang for him. But there was another part that was dark. I was angry at my mom and dad. But you learn to live with that split. You come this person, you walk up on stage and begin to sing. And then you walk off and put on this person, you go over here and say, I am so angry, I'm so mad, and it doesn't compute with this guy over here. So it's almost like your personality splits, or when you need to, you can go over here. But your real life over here is self-hatred, no respect, you carry tremendous amounts of shame. And I remember telling Tori, we hadn't been married that long, I said, I feel like two people. There's this addict over here that's crying out, and then the Holy Spirit's over here crying out. And so I learned to live with that division and function in it as best I could. When you grow up in a home like that, there's chaos.
Sure.
And you know how to live in chaos. So that day, I was 26 years old, there's no Coke, and I drank a Heineken. Didn't really like the taste of it at all. But it was cold, and I thought, well, they do it. And my dad drank vodka, so this ain't
this
like
is
that. And but Andrew, from the get-go, there were 3 of them in that refrigerator. When I had the first one, all the voices began to get quiet. Personalities came together, and I didn't hate myself anymore. And all my feelings were subdued. All those voices were subdued. And Andrew, the first time it happened, after that third Heineken, and I began to start, okay, I'm going to do this tomorrow too. And I really thank God. I said, I can live this way. I did. I was on my knees. Thank you, Jesus.
This is like
Thank
God
you.
in a bottle to you.
Yeah,
A way to cope.
yeah. And it's like, I've provided a way out. You won't feel your pain anymore.
Uh-huh.
You won't feel those voices and that split that's in you that loves God and wants to serve God, and then this addict that's crying out to be fed. But the shame of it, with the Imperials, and just, I don't deserve to be here.
Yeah.
And if these people knew the struggle that's going on inside of me, you're caught in this numb place for a few months thinking, man, this God provided a way out for me because I don't hurt anymore. And I can stand up and, not take any of this stuff on stage. But then it turns on you after a while. And then all of a sudden you become its slave. And it's screaming out every day to be fed. And you spend your life planning how to do this, how to hide, and how to do what needs to be done every day.
Sure, the job, really.
Yeah.
It becomes that. But,
Yeah.
The question that I have there is, we all live with certain dichotomies, I think, of who we were created to be and being in our kind of prime calling and where we're most where we're most connected with our Creator and our calling, and then our humanity, which is pulling at that a little bit all the time. Did you ever feel, so when you're singing for Jesus, even though you're going back to the hotel and getting drunk every night or whatever, did you feel you weren't singing for Jesus anymore, though? Or was this still like an expression of...
Oh, I loved him. When we were thrown out of the church and stuff like that, I was 12, and, I sang and played. And so I get my guitar, and I go to church Sunday night like I've always done my whole life. But my uncle stops me at the door, and he said, "Russ, we don't want you here." Mm-hmm. And I said, "Uncle, I didn't do anything wrong. We don't care, you're a son, and we don't want you here." Mm-hmm. And so my way of life that brought me, good stuff like singing and playing and feeling the anointing and stuff, all of a sudden I can't do it anymore. And so, and Mama, they call it covert incest, where they start dumping. You become a spouse. She had to talk to somebody. Mm-hmm. And so she dumped it on me. So every night I would have to sit, and she would come and talk about, we're probably going to lose the house. We can't make the payments anymore. And he's like, how do you deal with
and you're how old?
That impending doom? 11. It started when I was 11. And the first time she did it, I just said, I wish you would just leave. And she backhands me and busts my lip. and says, he's your father, you have to respect him. After her spending 35 minutes running, how a loser he is. But so you see that, and it, it's confusing and it's scary. But I started something, Andrew, just out of desperation, because I was dying. I mean, I was flunking out of school. I couldn't concentrate. But I went down to that little church, and, when you're 11 or 12, it's scary to walk into a dark church. But I would feel my way to the front with the pews, and there was a little lamp, and I would turn it on. Now, I wasn't allowed to go there for service and stuff anymore, but after Mom, I did our nightly routine of, dumping, I would sneak out of the house. And when there's addiction in that, nobody cares, nobody pays attention to who's going on. Yeah. And I would go down there for 30 to 40 minutes, and I would talk to Jesus. And I would sit on that altar and cry and say, I don't know what to do. I don't know. But just that much brought me comfort. And so I started doing it every night. And it went on and on and on, that I had this connection with him that I would not normally had, except in these kind of circumstances. So you're going into your adult life, and you had this incredible experience with Jesus, but then over here, why was I beat like that? Why was I shunned when I would do good for Jesus? And, why would my mother beat their... And so you got all this going on in your head, and they're telling you, now this is what Jesus wants, and do this, and this is what Jesus wants. And you try, but these two things are screaming and fighting in your head. So I got to a point where I would do my best not to drink before a concert. And Most of the time I made it. But those voices all through the concert, God doesn't like you. Look what you're doing. You know, you're doing everything your dad did. And now you've turned into him. And I hated myself. I remember that year of just trying to shave without looking myself in the face. And physically beating myself with my fist, saying, why can't you do better?
It's as if music was, maybe for your mother too, but was God's salvation to you.
We couldn't watch TV, couldn't listen to radio.
Right.
Everything was wrong.
Yeah.
And so all we had for entertainment was Mom's record collection. And so she would draw, when life was as crappy as she could be, she would sit there and listen to music. Or she would learn a song that she was going to sing with her sisters that night. But it was her salvation too. It was her salvation too. So you watch all this growing up, and it's like, I don't know what to do in either way.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And so, but when I had liquor in my body, all of this just settled down. And that started a career of, then after a short amount of time, your body's crying out for it every day. And you're living to drink, to stay numb. And if I can just stay numb, everything's going to be all right. But you lie to yourself. And I didn't know I was lying at the time, but within a few months, it had me. And, you know, I remember one of my closest friends pulling me aside about when I was 27, 28, something like that, and says, you have a problem. And I, what? No. If you want to know what a problem is, you know, straight vodka for 3 weeks and no food. Now that's a drunk.
Yeah.
You know, me, I'm just having some wine, having some beer, and I can justify it. And whatever you can justify, you can live with. And so, you know, and I would talk about, you know, me on stage and the feeling of the peace of God and how much He loves us. But in my heart, you know, I was dying, absolutely dying. It's like you build this image of who you are, or who you want people to see.
Yeah.
And here's this gospel singer with a big smile and got it all under control, and people love that image. But behind that image was this little Auschwitz survivor holding that image up and starving to death because he's not getting any love, you know, and you're afraid if people see behind that thing, they're going to find out that you're nothing like you're talking about. So by the time I had that drink and everything settled down, but then hell started happening all around me because immediately I started hiding and lying, my body needing more and more. And I didn't know how to get out, but then one day with a lot of therapy, a whole lot of therapy, to try to, what is all of this stuff? I'm about to blow on this keg. Yeah. And some therapist, I said, why am I drinking something? Well, you're doing this, and this causes this, and this causes that. You know? But first, you got to stop drinking. And it scared the crap out of me.
Sure.
Because it's been years, and I don't know how to live this way anymore.
Yeah.
I know how to live with this chaos, because I can kind of control it.
Yeah, you can manage it.
Right, manage it. And I can go sing, and I can come home and you know, wrestle with those demons and beg God to forgive me and go back out on the road, you know, and then come home and beg after that. So when it just settled me down, but then it starts turning on you. With a vengeance. I mean, because immediately for me, I wasn't one of these guys that had one and, you know, 8 months later had another one. And me, it was boom, just like that. And being in treatment. And, I mean, you can't even brush your teeth without permission.
Right.
Everything's taken away from you. And to shave, you have to go, you know, talk to I'm going to go shave, and they would check on you. You're not killing yourself with that razor. And so, but what they're trying to do within 30 days is to break down your whole world. And it's like a friend of mine said. He said, Russ, you're in the music business. You know what a manager, of course I know what a manager. He said, what if your manager was stealing from you, lying to you, and bringing such chaos in your life and listed like that? He goes, what would you do to that manager? I said, well, I'd fire him.
Right.
He said, well, you need to fire this God that you've been, you know, confessing, because that's not the way he is. Yeah. Read the red, read the red, read the red. A friend of mine said, and I began to see a Jesus, Andrew, I didn't know.
Yeah. Well, I've heard you say that before. If your Jesus is condemning you, you have the wrong one, right? Fire him. And
find one that loves you.
Find the one that loves you. Do you feel like for years, maybe because of that legalistic upbringing or because of the shame messages and then the alcohol and all this escape and chaos, do you feel like you were discipling yourself for years after the wrong Jesus?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because I had tried, and because when my dad failed so bad, and I went into my adult life, well, I'll do it. He couldn't do it, but I can. And he drank vodka, and I have wine. Right. So I'm not like him, but nobody can do it.
Yeah.
Nobody can do it. And I remember that first couple of nights in treatment, and being out in the field and just screaming at God. And I felt like he said to me, "Go ahead, I can take it." And I started screaming all my life. All I ever wanted to do was to sing for you and live my life for you. Now look at me, you know. I don't know if I have a marriage when I leave here. You know, I don't know if I'm going to have a career when I leave here. But I yelled it out, yelled. And honestly, I felt like he said, "You feel better?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you're going to see." And I did after a few weeks. I was yelling at me. I was screaming at me, not Jesus.
You had become God to you.
Yeah.
You were the one who were going to manage this and save yourself from it.
I can take care of it. I don't have a problem. And but I slept. I slept. There's 2 days. I got to get back. Here I go. I had a whole week this time. So you stop drinking, and here's all this chaos still running, and the voices, because of your years of putting your brain to sleep, have tripled.
Yeah. And
but there again, someone said, one of my friends, "Hey, go with me to this meeting."
Yeah.
Go with me to this meeting. And I said, "Well, I got liquor on my breath." Well, I don't care. Come. And so I was in a room full of people that did the same thing I did, but yet they had found forgiveness. And they were talking about this sobriety. And I found out later, Andrew, I was drinking to feel what I felt when he made everything okay with years of therapy and talking through stuff with him, Jesus, and the therapist that we had was incredible, because I'd say, "Why am I doing this?" Well, you started out here and here, then you wind up over here. But I have decided to follow Jesus. And that little voice said, "Are you willing to go to any lengths for help, for health?" And it's like the crippled man by the gate or by the pool, and it was the strangest phrase when Jesus talked to him and he was crying out, and Jesus asked, "Will you be made whole?" I never understood until it was asked of me. Will you be made whole? Your whole life's going to change when I get involved. You're going to have to get a job.
Yeah.
You're going to have to start taking care of your family and not sitting here and begging all day long. There's a lot of bad habits that are going to have to be broken. Do you want to do that work? Are you willing? Then I'll heal you. And the guy said yes. And I said yes. And that started the first step of will you be made whole? But it was a long process. But God would give me just a few little miracles and a few little miracles that kept me going, this is going to be worth it.
Yeah.
This is going to be worth it. And when you don't feel like it, you're meditating, you're praying. I remember writing on my mirror with a dry erase just affirmations that I would say to myself, like that Gloria Gaither line that I use so much. I then shall live as one who's been forgiven. I'll walk with joy to know my debts are paid. I know my name is clear before my Father. I am his child and I am not afraid. So when all of the guilt and the shame that, that just ruined me, I would quote this. And and it was a ping pong, back and forth.
Yeah.
But the ping pong got, closer.
Closer.
And then pretty soon both things joined, and I felt, will you be made whole? I was whole.
When peace cannot be found, and sleep won't visit me tonight, a restless mind that I can't tame, I walk the floor, I call your name. Finally silence, and the tears begin to fall, and I cry, and you're the one who hears me calling. I fall so easily, but you're there to catch me. Say the words that heal me. I'm safe when I'm with you. You touch my eyes, I can see. Oh, the comfort that you bring when nothing else can reach inside. Sympathetic friends are all around. Their soothing words fall to the ground. In the silence, I feel you here with me. And I cry, and you're the one who hears me calling. Catch me. Say the words that heal me. I'm safe when I'm with you. You touch my eyes, I can see. Oh, 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 oh.
I want to ask you, because your story and this movie, I still believe, is, I think, as much both your stories as it is Russ's. And there are so many people, which we were talking about this earlier, I think you and me, Tori, about how so many people have, your story is unique because it is your story, and yet themes of it, themes of alcoholism, themes of what that does to a family, of hiding and escaping, that is in a lot of people's stories. What I have noticed is that can really push people away from God, but what I've noticed with both of you, individually, together, that you continually are compelled back towards God. Did you feel, was that like a conscious effort that was like, we're going to continue to direct ourselves towards God, or is, you know what I'm saying? Or was that just a part of?
No, it was a decision. Mm-hmm. For me it was, anyway.
He talked about being mad at God. And which baffled me the first time he said that, because I'm like, he's not pouring it down your throat. Mm-hmm. But I know and I understand what he was saying. He was angry at God because he was trying so hard and this wasn't supposed to happen.
And I couldn't live perfect.
Right.
And I never was angry at God because I didn't feel like he had anything to do with the negative part.
Right. This was human.
Exactly. This was human frailty. Mm-hmm. What I do remember feeling gypped, sort of like, wait, I married the spiritual one. This is so not supposed to happen. But again,
he was the youth pastor at the place.
Yeah,
crying out loud.
Yeah, I didn't ask for this. I didn't. Yeah.
But again, it didn't get aimed at God. The farthest away I felt from God during the worst of it wasn't, I can't believe you did this to me, I'm going to pull away from you. It was when I was numbed by pain. I was numbed by fear. I was numb. It was put one foot in front of the other, do the next right thing, and it felt like this slogging baton death march of my life. And the numbing, and again, it was emotional numbing, it wasn't a chemical numbing, but it was just, there's a point in which you're absorbing so much and dealing with so much that you just kind of tilt, and it kind of, and at that time I felt pretty far from God. It didn't feel like either one of us had rejected each other. It felt like I don't feel anything.
Sure.
Except not good.
Sure.
And scared.
Yeah.
And she grew up with great parents, and a wonderful family.
We had the normal level of dysfunction.
Yeah, sure.
But all this was totally unknown. You know, when you said the word alcoholic, I see an old bum under a bridge.
Right.
And you don't see somebody that's functioning in society.
And pretty high functioning at,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of
Yeah,
times.
and
My family had always been, and still is, my safe place. It's
Yeah.
my touchstone. It's what I would, when my parents were alive, that's where I go back and refuel and recharge and laugh and have, and family was never safe for him.
Right.
And so there was love there always for his family, for his parents, for his brothers, but it wasn't safe. And so we came at that in two completely opposite.
because we're talking about shoe dropping. If I love you, I'm going to be vulnerable, and I can get hurt that way because the other
Right.
shoe is going to drop.
So did that cause this interaction that I can't be vulnerable with? If Tori, for you, my spouse, the one I love the most, but the ones you had loved so deeply were not safe. Did that translate here that well, Tori must not be safe either? I can't express
If she
this.
really knew all that I was doing and all that I had done, she wouldn't hang around. I mean, I didn't even want to be with myself.
Yeah, right.
You know, and I couldn't stand being by myself. It was just like, it's overload. And so, but she came into this with a great family and wanted it for herself and me.
And I thought, I remember one really extravagant fight we had one time in the piano room of the first house on Hillside Drive. And he's not a physically violent person at all, ever. But at the height of this, and this was before his original diagnosis.
Well, and there was a lot of rage in me.
There was a lot of rage.
And it could go off just like that.
And I remember being in that room and he was yelling, which was not his nature. And you hit the wall. It was an old wall. It was plaster, so you couldn't bust through, which would have been much more effective. But I remember him hitting the wall and he was yelling at me. And he said, "Go ahead and leave. You're going to leave. They always do, because I'm a Taff, and this is what Taffs do.
We screw everything up.
We screw everything up." And I remember thinking, okay, what? And first of all, too dramatic. Yeah. And secondly, and at that point I was
down a notch.
I was
Use
too
your
angry.
words. Use your words.
That's right.
But it was a place of great shame because I was doing to her what my dad did to me. And I'd never been in that position before, and more shame, more self-hatred.
But what changed when you realized this wasn't the same scenario? You know, when you realized Tori's here and she's not going anywhere. Did you always know you had that love, that kind of elementary foundational love?
I always feel a little compelled to say, leaving was always on the table in my heart. I was living with the product of a woman, and I completely understand why. There's economic, there's all kinds of reasons why his mom didn't take those boys and leave. I understand it. But I was living with the product of a woman who should have left. And I wasn't going to be that woman. And I even before the girls, I didn't ever tell myself I'm staying no matter what. Okay. There's nothing he can do that I didn't believe that.
And I knew that. I knew that.
So the option in of itself may have actually kept the communication open.
And I had really
you didn't feel
good
trapped.
input. No, I did. Well, no, not in the sense of I have no options. And I had really good, we had good, therapy and counseling around us. And my brother, Matt, who was unbelievably amazing through this, he's a therapist. My family knew we'd need him, so we grew our own.
There again, God bringing somebody into my life that I needed.
Yeah.
And miraculously, he didn't do therapy with us, but he could guide us towards the people. And miraculously, he managed to be a safe place for both of us, which is I still don't know. That's a boundary level I know not of.
Yeah.
But he was married to an addict.
Okay.
And they did divorce. And he had a son, and he raised the son. And so I had an example of you're not trapped. And it's heartbreaking and horrible and wrenching. But if you have to go, you have to go. He didn't say that verbally, but his life showed me that.
Sure.
So I don't want to belabor that, but because sometimes when we did make it.
Yeah.
As of what time is it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
For every marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I don't, I'm a little sensitive to putting the message out to someone who's sitting out there and who's hurting and scared. And their situation may be violent. Their situation may be different.
Maybe life-threatening
and feels like, and feels like the godly thing to do is stay because they stayed and made it.
Well, what I hear you talking about, what I hear that as is someone who's always interested in health. And so if the healthy, I think seeking health, true health, is seeking our true reflection of God. I think, that's to be healthy. So if you have to seek that elsewhere, that's just humanity at play in our lives. We know divorce isn't the design of marriage, but neither is death the design of life. We're living in these contexts that weren't original.
Yes.
And so to be able to reflect who we were created to be more purely sometimes requires a leaving. And I hear you saying that, and I hear that message being important for others to hear.
And I knew that the healing was going to happen or not happen.
Right.
In Russ.
Right.
Regardless of if I was there or not. I did know, and I felt in my gut, that if I was the last man standing, if I'm the last one he pushed out of the circle, I did feel like that would probably, I didn't know how much longer he'd be alive, but it didn't feel like I have to stay and save him.
Yeah.
It felt like if he isolates me, if he shoves me to the point that I can't be here, then, but I always knew that the miracle in this that needed to happen was not for the marriage to be saved. The miracle that needed to happen was for this man, who was a man after God's own heart in so many ways, that this man needed to be healed. And if I couldn't stick around for it, then we deal with that when it happened. And if the marriage survived or didn't survive, I wanted him to.
Yeah, yeah.
And for me, she was hanging. I was holding a thread. That's all I could, And I knew, as screwed up as I am right now, if she leaves, I'm going to totally just go insane. I mean, I can't. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I was over. It's like if I lose her.
I felt less like a savior and more like a tether.
Interesting.
It was like he was all the way out there.
Yeah.
And I knew at that point I couldn't reach him. Yeah. So it was not if I'm going to come up with the right prayer and the right thing to say, and I'm going to. It took me years to figure out that saying it 1,000,000 times and in all different versions was not going to fix it. Russ was glad when those years were.
She's still rehearsing.
Glad when I got enough therapy to realize that.
Yeah.
If I say it just right, he'll see how bad this is and he'll want to change it. But it did feel like I knew that the only person who could reach the spirit man was God.
Well, it may have not felt like this in the thick of it, but to me, what I hear is a reliance, whether you knew it or not, was an intuitive reliance on God. Even if you didn't feel that or whatever, it was like we as humans, we as individuals, we as a couple cannot survive this on our own. And surviving is not even the point at that point, like you're saying. It's about how can we be restored to God, which is our
Yes.
whole life's goal.
Right. Yes.
So there's a quote in the one of the trailers of the movie, and I kind of want to wrap with this. Gospel, Russ, you said this. The gospel is greater than I could have ever possibly imagined. For both of you, if that's true for you too, what does that mean?
I'll tell a quick story, parable, whatever you want to.
You don't tell quick stories. So we'll just edit that out.
No, that's why I married her. I mean, we can laugh. There was this guy that lived in. He was Irish, and his farm bellied up. I mean, he lost, and he sold whatever he sold his land and all this other kind of stuff to buy a ticket to New York, and the trip was going to take 3 weeks. So he went and bought enough cheese and crackers to get him through the 3 weeks. And this porter from the ship was walking, every day he was kind of walking, and he would see that guy sitting there eating his cheese and crackers. And he said to him, we have a great chef. If you have a special diet or what, we can accommodate you. And he kind of bowed his head and embarrassed and said, well, I only had enough for the ticket. I didn't have enough for the food and stuff like that. And the guy, the porter said, it was included in your ticket. That's already paid for. But going up the way that I did, there was just such a limited view. And you try to do it right, but you're not quite sure. But all of a sudden, you're dealing with this man on the cross that did it for me. So I got to be worth something. I got to be worth something. But it was surrender. And then the second step, believe that can restore us to sanity. And goes through 12 of those steps, which they actually got from a revival that was happening in the 30s in New York, the whole East Coast. It was called the Oxford Movement. But a real move of God had happened. And the fellows who wrote the book, the first 6 steps were what they got from that meeting.
Yeah, you're talking about the 12 steps.
Yeah, and then they added, more to kind of sum the whole thing up. So the whole principle of the thing was started as a spiritual concept. If we do this, we do this, we do this, and we do a 5th step because we want to deal with the past, that it won't keep reaching up and grabbing us. But it was hard. I can't stress hard, but are you willing to go to any lengths? Are you willing to change? I hope that answers your question. I don't know. Okay. This helps so much just to sit and do something like this to prepare us, for the other ones that are coming, because you're our friend.
So we're your guinea. I'm your guinea.
Yeah.
That's right.
You're one of those people God brought to me, just in my time of need. So I knew you liked this, and you'd let us try some of the story out on you.
Reeling him
And
back.
I'm an old school codependent, so if you tell me that you need me,
That's
I'll
right.
be like, I'm there.
It seems like he needs to talk.
Yeah.
So for me,
Yes.
where we are now, I look back and it's like, I said this, it's like God left this trail of human breadcrumbs. And so it's only at this point in our lives, and with this film happening, that I'm looking back, and that whole vista, that whole picture is so much greater than I could ever have imagined. And that whole picture is God. That whole picture isn't just our story arc, and it isn't just our past. It is, look what he did over there. Oh my gosh, remember when look what he did over there. And that is beyond anything I could have imagined.